In this video, we're going to look at how to build fast static websites with Hugo and host them for free in GitHub Pages. So Hugo is a static site generator, and the way that it works is it takes markdown files and configuration files to produce websites. It's similar to the GitHub Pages and GitHub README files, where you kind of put markdown in there and it generates a website for you. Hugo's a lot more complex and has a lot more features, but it also has things like themes. So you can look at their theme library, pull down a theme that's good for either a company page, a blog, a landing page, that kind of thing. So I'll be using a theme to build a website today, and we're just going to use the Hugo command line tool to get started. So if I just type Hugo on the command line, you can see that it complains that it's unable to locate a configuration file. And then it suggests creating a new site. So that's what I'm going to do. And to do that, I can use the Hugo new site command, and then I'm going to name my site Gatherer. Like any good programmer, I have a bunch of domains that I'm not using that I've bought for various projects, and I'm going to use one of those and hook it up to GitHub Pages today. So now that I've generated my site, I'm actually going to go and open that site in Visual Studio Code. So if we go to Gatherer and say code dot, you can see that it has created this folder structure for us. At the top we have archetypes, and then we have content, data, layouts, public, static, and themes, which are all empty directories. Finally, we have a configuration file, which kind of controls the configuration for the entire site. You see the base URL is set to an example.org, we have a language code set, and then we have a title of the page set. From this point on, we kind of have a functional Hugo website. So if I were to actually start up the Hugo server, which is a server that kind of listens for changes and refreshes the page, you can say Hugo server, and now it's actually listening on port 1313. So if I were to actually open that, you can see I have a blank Hugo page. So the website's up and running, but there's no content, there's no theme or anything like that. So our next step is to kind of pull down a theme so that we can then start to add content to the theme and modify the theme. So if we go back to Visual Studio Code, I am going to stop the Hugo server, and I am going to actually pull down a theme called Hugo Coder. So Hugo Coder kind of looks like this. There are some customizations you can do around theming. You can add like your picture, you can add like social icons and that kind of thing. So the idea is kind of it's supposed to be for a blog, a personal blog. So to actually create the theme or download the theme, what you can actually use is Git to do so. So one concept in Git is a submodule. So it's actually taking this repository and adding it as a submodule to our existing repository. So the first thing I actually need to do is do git init so that I actually have a Git repository set up in my Gatherer site. And then from there, what I'm actually going to do is pull down the Hugo Coder theme. So you can see I'm doing git submodule add, the URL of the Hugo Coder Git repository, and then the destination of where I want to put that theme. And I want to put it in the themes/Hugo Coder folder. So now we've cloned down the theme, and you can see on the left-hand side here, it's actually brought down a whole bunch of stuff, which is that whole repository we're looking at in the browser. And it has all kinds of things like CSS and fonts, layouts, images, all kinds of stuff. So now, technically, to use the theme, all we need to do is specify theme in our config.toml, and I want to use Hugo Coder. So now I save that, and if I were to run my Hugo server again and reload this page, you can see now it says my Hugo site at the top. So I haven't done any of the configuration required for this theme. That's why it's very minimal. It has the footer with the copyright, and it has the title of the site at the top. What's cool about the Hugo server is like if I make changes to things like this configuration file, I could say Adam Driscoll is the name of this website, if I can type. And now it detected that change, rebuilt the site, and if we actually go back here, you can see I actually updated the title to Adam Driscoll. So the next kind of step here is each theme is going to have a series of configuration elements that you can adjust. And most sites will have, or themes will have an example site folder that provides a bunch of content, layout examples, images, and the most important is the configuration. So in here you can see that there's a bunch of configuration options. We have things like the base URL, the title, and the theme, which we've seen. But then we have parameters for the theme itself. The author, the description of the author, keywords about this website, info about the author. So each one of these parameters is going to be custom to a theme potentially, because they're using it in different places within the theme. So you can see that this one has a whole bunch of parameters. It even gets into things such as the social buttons that appear, languages, it has multi-language support, and then menus. So you can actually not only create menus, but you can also create menus in different languages. So I've actually taken this theme here, or this configuration here, and customized it for myself. So if I actually go in here to my config.toml and just replace it with, the content is pretty much the same as what you saw. It's a little simplified from what was on the GitHub repository, but I updated it for myself, and if I save that now, you're going to see that the website itself is a lot more interesting. So there's my face and my name, and it's put in these social icons, and you can put in the tags that you want under your name, and it created the menu. So those are all effects of the theme, and each theme is going to be a little bit different. It's going to obviously look different depending on how you customize it inside your configuration file. So next, what we want to do is actually, in this case, this is a blog, so we want to add some additional content to it. So this is the home page. This was automatically generated by the theme, but additional pages you're going to create as markdown files. So what I want to do is I want to create my first post inside my Hugo theme here, and if I actually click this blog button right now, you're going to see that it's a 404 not found, and that's because there are no blog posts, so it doesn't have anything to create there. So I'm going to pop back into my command line here, and I'm going to actually issue a Hugo new, and then I'm going to say posts my first post.md. So md as markdown file. So now I've created my markdown file, and if I actually go back into Visual Studio Code, what you're going to see here is that my first post has been created. This little header section at the top provides a bunch of information about this post, which depending on the theme will be surfaced in different ways. It could just be metadata for SEO purposes, and or it could actually show up in the page. So for example, the title obviously is going to show up, so we can say my first post, and I'm going to change draft to false. If draft is true, it won't actually produce the page. It's more for just authoring pages, and you won't actually be able to see it inside the Hugo server, and it won't be generated when you run the Hugo build command. So we're going to save that, and now when I click blog, you're going to see that my first post showed up. Obviously, if we played with this theme a little bit, we could probably make it look better, or maybe when you have more posts it'll look better, but right now it's just a date and the title of the post. I click that, and you can see my first post is shown. It has the date. It's calculating how long it's going to take to read this, which is a 0-minute read. And then from there, I can actually start to add content to my post. So I could have a header, I could have a list of things, I could put images. And as you save that, it's going to rebuild the site, regenerate the HTML, and kind of fill out your page. So now let's take the next step of actually hosting the website we just built in GitHub. So what I'm going to do now is actually go out to GitHub and create a new GitHub repository. So click this little plus, new repository. I'm going to call it, if I can get there, Gatherer. And I'm going to make it public. If you do not have a subscription to GitHub, you can't make GitHub pages from private repositories. So I'm just going to make this public, and I will create that. So now my repository has been created, and I need to add my files from Hugo up to this repository. So do note that I did run a git init inside here. So if I were to actually run git status in here, you can see that it has some commits and that kind of thing. But what I want to actually do is initialize this remote from my local git. And there are some commands in here, but we're going to skip some of them just because those are assuming that we don't have anything at all. So I am going to first stage and commit all my changes, which I'll do git add dot, and then I will do git commit m initial. So this is my initial commit, and now you can see my initial commit has kind of taken effect. And from there, what I can actually do are these last 3 changes. I want to create a new branch called main, and then I want to add the remote origin, which is going to set up this GitHub repository as the origin of my local repository, and then I'm going to push up to origin. So let's just do that in here. I can copy and paste. And now we push up to origin. And if we actually come back to GitHub and refresh this page, you can see all the files have been set up. So one thing you're going to notice is that we don't have any HTML files still. We still have like our markdown post file and our config file and that kind of thing. So in order to actually host on GitHub pages, what we need to do is generate some HTML files. So the next step would be to actually run the Hugo build command. So to do that, you would just do Hugo-D. So that actually builds the site, similar to how the web server built the site. But what you'll notice on the left-hand side here is in my docs folder, I actually have a bunch of HTML pages and CSS and fonts and that kind of thing. So now that HTML can be hosted in GitHub pages. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is docs in a sec. I have configured that. By default, it's going to publish to the public folder. But to host in GitHub pages, we want to put it in a docs folder if we're going to have our repository laid out this way. So let's just add our HTML up to our gatherer repository. And once that's done, if we reload this page, we will now see that we have this docs folder here with HTML files in it. So to set this up as GitHub pages, we can click Settings, Pages, and then I actually want to click this Source. I'm going to select the main branch, and then from there, I'm going to select my docs folder. So now it's going to look in that docs folder, and it's going to serve those HTML files from GitHub pages. Then I'll click Save. So it says your site is ready to be published. And if you actually go here, you're going to notice that you get a 404. That's because the actual building of this and publishing of the site takes a few minutes. So you'll see this little orange circle here. If you actually click that, you can see that the deployment for this site is currently being queued. So it is now, pulling and going to be building the site, and then it will publish that up to GitHub pages. Now you can see that the build and deploy of the GitHub pages has completed successfully. So if we actually go back to our link for our pages and click that, you can see it published it, but it doesn't look quite right. And the reason that is because the base URL is different. So if we actually look at this URL here, and I want to copy that URL, and if we go back to our TOML file, what you're going to notice is that the base URL here was set to example.com. So that is why it can't load the resources correctly. It needs to know that we're actually being hosted at Gatherer. So once we make that change to the TOML again, we need to run the Hugo-D command. It's going to regenerate all the HTML pages, and what you're going to notice here, instead of example.com, now it's actually loading from our Gatherer site. So let's push that back up. So I'm going to say, this was base URL. Check that in and sync those changes. And from there, we are actually going to be running the build again. So you see this little dot showed up again, and it's going to queue and build the Hugo site again. Now that our second deploy has completed, what we can actually do is go back to our website, go to Pages. You can see our site has been published and click it. You're going to notice right off the bat, you're like, why didn't it work? But if you hit Control F5 to reload the CSS, it's going to load it correctly because it had it cached. So now you can see our site is loaded and looking correctly. So I should be able to click blog and go to my first post, and you can see my posts are here and that kind of thing. I could add more content, do another build, and push it back up to my website here. So that's kind of how we go from building locally to publishing up to GitHub pages. I want to take this one step further and actually hook up a custom domain and put it behind Cloudflare. So Cloudflare is a service that kind of does DNS protection or DDoS protection, and they do caching and proxying, that kind of thing. So your site's actually a little bit faster because they have a CDN where they can like cache a lot of stuff that you may be serving from your website. So rather than serving it directly from GitHub Pages, it's going to come out of the Cloudflare cache. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're actually going to hook up one of our domains. So I have this Gatherers Online inside. I'm using GoDaddy here, and if I click DNS, what I need to do to get this hooked up inside of Cloudflare is actually change the name servers. By default, you can see the name servers here are domaincontrol.com, and I want to hook them up to Cloudflare. So in order to do that, what I need to do is get my domain name, and I've logged into Cloudflare here, and you can see some of my domains, but I'm going to actually click Add New Site. And I want to put my Gatherers Online site here and click Add Site. From there, I'm just going to select the free plan. They have a bunch of other options. It's going to scan my DNS records, and you can see that it found some of the stuff that is actually listed in inside GoDaddy right now. And I think I'm going to click continue here. And next, what I want to do is actually replace the domain control name servers with the Cloudflare ones. So I'm going to click copy here. I am going to go over and click change here. I want to enter my own name servers. I'm going to enter the Cloudflare ones. And sometimes some services have 4, these have 2. And I'm going to say save. And it's going to say, are you sure you want to do this? And click continue. So propagating the name server can take a while. As it said, this could take up to 48 hours depending. And once we've done this inside GoDaddy, we have to come back to Cloudflare and click done and check name servers. So what will happen now is it is going to take anywhere from 10 minutes to 48 hours for this to propagate, and Cloudflare will actually send you an email once this happens. I'm always like, come on, let's see if it if it worked, but it says please wait a few hours. But yeah, so once that's done, we can move on to the next step. Now that Cloudflare has finished setting up the DNS and name servers, you can see that the page looks a little different. It no longer says that it's waiting for name servers to be configured. And you can actually click the DNS settings on the left-hand side here and see that we're proxying to a couple places and that kind of thing. So now what we want to actually do is we want to set up the custom domain for GitHub Pages. So on the Pages tab in your settings for your repository, you're going to go down to this custom domain setting. And what we want to actually do is put in our gatherers.online URL, and then we're going to copy this adamdriscollgithub.io. So we'll save that. And then you can see it's trying to do a DNS check. And what we want to do here is actually come over to Cloudflare and set up a DNS record for this. So we're actually going to do a CNAME. We're going to do @ and we want that to target adamdriscoll.github.io. I'm going to leave on the proxying. When you have the proxy on, it's actually going to go through Cloudflare first, and that actually gives you the benefit of things like DDoS protection and their caching. So, oops, we need to actually delete this record first because it is the same as the one I just tried to add. So now when we save this, now you can see that the CNAME is Gatherers Online and adamdriscoll.github.io is where we're targeting. So if we come back to our pages, you can see that the DNS check was now successful. So now, if I actually go to Gatherers Online, I think I should HTTPS, and you can see here that now it shows my GitHub page. Note that the CSS is no longer working, and to fix that, remember we have to come back into our config.toml here and actually set Gatherers Online to our base URL. So I'm actually going to put that in there, and we'll do a new Hugo build that will update all our HTML files, and we are going to update for the DNS record now. So we'll save that, sync those changes, and if we come back to our GitHub repo, you can see that it is running a deployment right now. So we'll just wait for that GitHub page deployment to complete. Now that the deployment has completed, we can actually come back over to, our page, which is gatherers online. So I will type that in, go here, do a hard refresh, and now you can see it actually loads up the CSS and JavaScript correctly. So now I have my blog up and running. And what's cool is, like, yeah, that took a couple steps, but now we have a website that is on a custom domain. It's hosted for free in GitHub Pages. We can easily add posts via Hugo. It's behind Cloudflare, which gives us some protection against DDoS, and also gives us some performance in terms of caching. Now that we have our page hosted, it's loaded up in GitHub Pages, it's behind Cloudflare, and it's running a static page, it should be pretty fast. So I'm going to press F12, and this works in both Chrome and Microsoft Edge. If you go to the Lighthouse tab in Chrome, what you can do is you can actually run a test on your page. So generate report will look for things like accessibility, performance, progressive web app, and SEO settings. So I'm going to click generate report, and you're going to see in the background that the page is going to reload a couple times. So it's actually computing information about the page, like how quickly the page loads, if it's loading a bunch of JavaScript and that kind of thing. And you can see that this Hugo site, which I just kind of generated on a whim here, has a performance of 100, which is the max value. So it's a very, very fast website in terms of what Google sees day to day. So in this video, we looked at how you can set up a static website using Hugo and GitHub Pages to host it for free.